I had a great childhood before my parents divorced. I lived in a big old house with tons of backyard space and a brand new in-ground pool. I was the middle daughter with only 2 brothers at the time, so we had your typical suburban nuclear family setup. My street had a lot of different kinds of people living on it, but my house was one of the only ones with a family in it. The house next door had an elderly couple with a whole bunch of dogs, and the house across the street had another elderly couple who loved pranking me and my older brother. They were awesome, to be honest. Next to them lived the guy this story is about, Mike. Mike was a secluded guy. He lived alone, and we only ever saw him when he was walking his dog or taking out the trash, which was weird because most people on my street knew each other very well. But no one really knew this Mike guy. I hardly ever saw the lights on in his house, and from what my older brother remembers, he was never really out and about like everyone else on our street. It's not like he wasn't home, because his really nice Jeep Wrangler was always parked in his tiny driveway, unless he was at work. One night, I was in our dining room with my parents playing some type of board game, when there was a knock at the door. This neighborhood was not rough by any means, so my parents usually kept our door unlocked until it was time to go to bed, and rarely ever denied opening the door to anyone. My dad noticed it was Mike, and immediately opened the door, being a friendly neighbor and inviting him in for a beer, even though we had never really socialized with him before. So Mike sits down, and I remember sitting across from him next to my dad, and being super shy and awkward because, honestly, this guy always gave me the creeps. He proceeds to tell my parents that he knew my mom worked for a home remodeling company. This isn't weird for him to know, as my mom's company car had the logo plastered all over it and was always parked in our driveway, and he wanted to know what her prices were, etc. So my mom starts giving him the sales pitch, and I got bored of the adult conversation and left to watch my brother play his Tony Hawk skateboarding game on his Xbox. Mike ends up staying for probably around an hour and leaves with a friendly handshake and a thanks for the beer. Yada, yada. My mom and dad exchanged confused glances once they shut the door behind him, and my dad made a comment about how that was super random and that the guy kind of had a weird vibe about him. But both he and my mom played it off as him being a loner and not having the best set of social skills. After this encounter, my mom started seeing Mike everywhere, and I mean everywhere. This was a big jump from before, when we would see him literally nowhere besides in front of his house or walking his dog. It's not even like it's one of those things where you buy a new car, and suddenly every other car you see out driving is the same as yours. I lived in a pretty tight-knit community in a small town, and it's hard to go out without seeing someone you know, and everyone was always super friendly and says hello even if they don't know each other well. My point being, if my mom had ever seen Mike in public before, she would have remembered. It started off as her seeing him in common places, like the grocery store or Target, gas stations, or the occasional trip to the bank. Then, as the weeks went on, she noticed that every time she would pull out of our driveway to leave to go somewhere, his red Jeep would immediately follow, like he was waiting for her to leave, and then would just jump in his car and follow. She even noticed him in the parking lot of her work one time. She knew it was him because of the bumper stickers he had. Things got really weird when he would start coming up to my mom while she was smoking on her porch, or just sitting out there reading. He would have really uncomfortable conversations with her, the kind where the person you're talking to is just so socially awkward that holding a conversation with them is physically painful, and you just want them to leave. This happened about twice a week, and my mom was starting to get really sketched out by his behavior. I think her breaking point was one day when she was at the gym, and he showed up. He had followed her there before, and she would always see him there using one of the machines behind her, and could feel him staring at her the whole time. Anyway, this time, He showed up about 45 minutes into her usual 1-hour workout, so he got onto the machine behind her and was there for the last part of her routine. When she got up to leave, he followed her. 15 minutes into his workout, he just decided to get up and leave at the exact same time my mom did. Not normal. She even took a super weird out-of-the-way route home to affirm her suspicions that he was following her, and sure enough, he was behind her the whole time, and told my dad that the next time he pulled this crap, she was going to confront him and hopefully scare him off. Fast forward a few weeks after this incident, and things had died down almost completely. My mom started to think that he had moved on to something else or realized that he was being a total weirdo. One night, I woke up late and went to the kitchen to get a drink of water. It must have been at least midnight, late, for a 10-year-old, because my parents were asleep, and the only light on in the house was a small lamp we kept on top of our piano in the dining room. To get from my bedroom to the kitchen, I had to walk through the dining room, the same one that looked out to our front porch and faced Mike's house across the street. I should mention that there was also a huge bay window on the same side of the dining room that was facing the street. So on my way through the dining room, I looked to my left just to take a peek outside. What I saw, I will never forget. It was Mike, just sitting on our porch, on one of our chairs, looking at my house through the huge bay window. We both realized we saw each other at the same time, and his eyes got huge, and he sprang up and sprinted back across the street to his house. I was so terrified that I never even told my parents. I know that's dumb, but I was only 10 and was afraid my parents would not believe me. Or worse, that they would believe me. And then my dad would go over there and seriously mess Mike up. I did my best just to forget about it. From then on, he never bothered my mom, and my parents ended up divorcing about 2 years later, and we moved out of that house. He never got his house remodeled either. Even though I don't live there anymore, I hope I never see Mike again. I had been driving for hours, a straight stretch of Route 84 cutting through the Nevada wilderness. The air was dry, the sky dark and vast, with only the occasional flicker of distant stars. I had been on the road too long, but I didn't care. The quiet was peaceful, the kind of solitude that lets you think without distractions. I wasn't expecting anyone else out here. It was past midnight, and I hadn't seen a single car in the last hour, not even headlights in the distance. The road was mine, and I liked it that way. But then I saw it in my rearview mirror, a white van. At first I thought it was just another car coming up behind me. But there was something about it. It didn't seem to be driving normally. It was just there, way too close. Not tailgating exactly, but close enough to make me uneasy. I couldn't see the driver or any details. It was just a plain white van, like something you'd see in a horror movie. I didn't want to think too much about it. I slowed down a little, hoping it would pass, but it didn't. Instead, the van slowed too. It stayed right there. I sped up again, hoping to shake it off, but the van kept pace. No matter what I did, it stayed just behind me. The tension in my chest began to tighten. Was this just a coincidence, or was it something more? I kept my eyes on the road, trying to focus, but the van didn't let up. Now it was so close I could see its headlights glaring in my side mirrors. There was no way it should have been able to keep up like that. The thought of stopping crossed my mind, but I quickly dismissed it. I didn't want to give the van a chance to get any closer. I took a sharp turn off the highway onto a smaller dirt road, thinking I could lose it there. The van followed, same speed, same distance. Panic started to set in. This wasn't a random car. There was something off about it. My heart pounded as I twisted the steering wheel, trying to lose the van. The road was getting rougher, and the headlights behind me grew brighter, blinding me. Then out of nowhere, the van's lights flickered and went out completely. It was like it had vanished into thin air. I slammed on the brakes and looked in my mirrors. Nothing. Not a single trace of the van. I didn't stop driving until I reached the nearest town, and even then, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone on that road. I haven't driven Route 84 since that night, and I have no idea what the van was or who was behind the wheel. But it's a memory I wish I could forget. My dad is a police officer and ex-military, and my mom is one of those types of people who worries about literally everything. This led to them teaching me how to behave in a variety of potentially dangerous situations, from code words to self-defense. I wish I were kidding, but we've even had a plan for a zombie apocalypse. Literally any potential disaster, we've discussed it. Fortunately, I have lived a very safe life and did not have to use their advice very often. I'm also an incredibly light sleeper. Even a text vibration on my phone wakes me up immediately. During the summer before my third year of college, I was living with a good friend of mine. We can call her E. E was very book smart, but somehow had zero situational awareness, as well as a horrible tendency to be the most annoying person you've ever met in your life after having one drink. At the time of the story, I was 20, and she was already 21. This led to a few nights of me getting angry because she wanted to choose to go to the cooler bars her other friends wanted to go to, but that I couldn't get into with my terrible fake ID. This particular night, we had talked about going out and hadn't even gotten ready together. Then, right before we were supposed to leave, she switched it up and decided she was actually going to meet her other friends at a bar I couldn't go to. And oh, I'm so sorry, sort of excuse. I wasn't about to tell her she can't do something, but walked away, visibly angry, and went to bed early. I woke up at around 3 because I had received a few texts in a row. Knowing it was her, that was extremely tempted to turn over and go back to bed. I decided to quickly check and see what she wanted, and saw multiple separate texts from E that said things like, "Oh my God, wake up. Please wake up. I'm in so much trouble. Police, help me." Unfortunately, I've gotten a new phone since this happened and don't have access to the original texts. I asked her what was happening, and she told me, with a lot of misspellings because of alcohol, that her friends left her at the bar. They didn't answer when she tried to call them, and then while she was standing outside the bar trying to call her friends, 2 older guys asked if she needed help. She told them that she was trying to get a hold of her friends so she could go home. To this day, I question why she didn't just order an Uber when she realized she was alone. But alcohol, I suppose. These 2 men point to a car and say it's their Uber, and if she'd like to, they don't mind dropping her off at home. E decides this sounds like a great idea and gets into the car with them. One guy sits up front in the driver's seat, and one sits in the back with E. This is obviously when things start to go south. E notices that they appear to be going the wrong direction and makes a comment that she lives the other way. No one says anything to her. Now the car exits onto a major highway that you would take if you wanted to leave our larger city for the neighboring large city, approximately 45 minutes away. This is the point where she started texting me for help. I tell her she needs to speak up, but she keeps telling me that she's too afraid to say anything. I tell her to say that she's going to be sick. No Uber driver will want you puking in their car and will pull over so you can get out. This is what my mom had drilled into my head as a kid. If you don't like something someone is doing in a car, tell them you're going to be sick. She refuses because she's too afraid. They finally asks where they are going, and they say, large city. She tells them, no, I live in the other city. And the guys laugh and say, well, just think of it as a suburb of the other city. Now E has gone into full panic mode. I've already run out of the house and I'm attempting to follow them. I have her sending me our location on the iPhone repeatedly so I can track and catch them. I'm repeatedly telling her to get out of the car and do not get back in. I was flying down the highway, but they still had maybe a 20-minute head start. I wanted to call the police because, 1, we obviously needed help, and 2, I'm driving in excess of 100 miles per hour down the highway and do not want to be pulled over. Unfortunately, E can't give me a description of what car she's in. No color, no make, nothing. I don't know how she finally spoke up or what she even said, but she was able to get the Uber driver to stop at a gas station that was quite literally the only thing around. It was an exit to a gas station just to enter back onto the highway. There was nothing else in the area. She was texting me to tell me they're pulling into a gas station. I tell her to get her butt into a bathroom stall, lock the door, and do not move until I get there. If she can't do that, to go stand next to the clerk and tell him to call the police because she doesn't know these men. But I swear to God, E, do not get back into that car. I don't care if they carry you kicking and screaming. You fight tooth and nail to stay out of the car. But of course, this is E, and she doesn't listen. She instead chooses to hide behind the gas station. At this point, I was just minutes away, and I figured I could get there before they went looking for her. I was a 20-year-old female, Irish, with shorter height and average weight, athletic, but not a hulk by any means. So I have no idea what I thought I would be able to do to these two 30-year-old men and their Uber driver. I also ran out of bed without getting dressed, so I was wearing fleece Guitar Hero pajama pants and a sports bra, no shoes. I pull into the gas station parking lot, and their car is the only one there. I got out of my car and marched up to the one standing by the gas station wall and quite literally went toe-to-toe with him. In my best low, cold, furious anger voice, I asked him where he was and what he thought he was doing. This grown man couldn't look me in the eyes and didn't bother speaking, but rather pointed to the back of the building. I yelled to E to get out here now, and we were going home. She comes around the building wearing only her bra and jeans, no shirt. I put her in my car and turn around to start yelling at the men. But as I turned, their Uber was already squeaking tires to get out of the gas station. E and I had a very quiet ride home. When I turned into my mother's house and told her that I wasn't mad at her, she was crying and apologizing to me. She was safe now, but the next time she needs to react quickly and speak up for herself because who knows what could have happened. Oh, and she didn't have a shirt on because there was a hill behind the gas station that she fell down and into a bramble patch, and her shirt was covered in stickers. The story isn't as terrifying as most of the ones I hear, but thinking about what could have happened had I not caught up with them and just how easy it is for them to do this chills me to the bone. It's hard to explain the loneliness of farming at night. When everyone else is asleep, and it's just you and the animals, the world feels still in a way that's almost unnatural. My farm is small, and I take care of it on my own, but on the night of the strange events, I wasn't prepared for what I'd find in the barn. I had just finished milking the cows and was walking back to the house when I noticed something odd. One of the cows, Daisy, was still in the barn, standing near the back gate, staring out into the darkness of the pasture. Normally the cows follow me back into their stalls after milking, but she just stood there, motionless. I called out to her, but she didn't respond. I figured she was just being stubborn, so I went back into the barn to check on her. As I got closer, I noticed that Daisy's eyes were wide, unblinking, and she was staring not at me, but into the dark corner of the barn. It was almost like she was waiting for something, or someone. Her body was tense, and I could hear her low, nervous hum. It didn't seem normal. I gently patted her neck, trying to calm her down. But just as I did, I heard a sound, a soft, almost imperceptible whispering coming from the darkness of the barn. "Come closer." I froze. It wasn't the voice of any person I knew, and it definitely wasn't the voice of any animal. The words were hollow, like they came from somewhere deep within the barn itself. I backed away slowly, but the whispering grew louder, more insistent. "And Daisy." She started to snort, tossing her head nervously. Without thinking, I turned and ran for the door. But as I did, I saw something move in the shadows, something tall, draped in tattered clothing, standing by the far wall. I blinked, and it was gone. I didn't wait to see what happened next. I bolted from the barn and didn't stop until I was inside my house, locking every door behind me. The next morning, when I went back out to check on the cows, Daisy was calm again, eating in the stall as if nothing had happened. But when I went into the barn, I could still hear it. The faintest whispering, like the wind brushing against the walls. I haven't been back to that corner of the barn since, and I'm not sure I ever will. I work in night shift at Lincoln County Hospital. There are unspoken rules when it comes to the dead body room. First, you never disturb the bodies unnecessarily. Second, you don't spend more time than needed in that room. Third, and most importantly, you never talk to the bodies. That last rule, it's one I didn't understand until that night. It was late, nearing 2 a.m., and I was wrapping up an autopsy when I felt that familiar weight in the air. That heaviness, that feeling like the room is holding its breath. I'd been working in the morgue long enough to know when something's off, but this night, something felt wrong. Maybe it was the long hours, maybe it was the silence, but when I finished with the autopsy, I decided to stick around and catch up on paperwork. The morgue was dimly lit, with the hum of the fluorescent lights providing a constant, eerie background noise. The stainless steel tables and drawers reflected the cold, sterile environment. I sat at the desk, the only source of warmth being the small lamp casting a yellow glow over my paperwork. That's when I heard it, a soft, dry whisper. It wasn't coming from the hall, it was coming from the back corner of the room. I spun around, expecting to see one of the cleaning staff or another technician who'd gotten lost. But there was no one. I stood there for a moment, heart thumping in my chest. The whisper came again. This time, it was clearer. It was a name, my name. Dr. Collins. Now, I'm not one to get spooked, but this wasn't normal. I checked the lights, checked the ventilation, checked the hallway. No one? I took a deep breath and went to investigate. As I stepped closer to the corner where the sound seemed to come from, I noticed something disturbing. The bodies on the slabs weren't positioned the way they should have been. Their arms were slightly moved, their heads turned just a little too far. I tried to tell myself it was just the result of the coolers shifting, or my tired mind playing tricks. But the longer I stood there, the more I could feel it. Something was in that room with me. It wasn't just the bodies. It was like the room itself was alive, waiting for me to acknowledge it. I approached the corner cautiously, my footsteps echoing in the silence. The air grew colder, and I could see my breath forming small clouds in front of me. The whisper came again, louder this time. "Doctor Collins." I reached the corner and found nothing but the cold, lifeless bodies. My hands trembled as I checked each one, making sure they were properly positioned. I backed away slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. The whispering grew louder, more insistent. It felt like the room was closing in on me, the walls pressing in from all sides. I knew I had to get out of there. I grabbed my things and bolted for the door, not daring to look back. As I reached the hallway, the whispering stopped abruptly, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. I didn't stop running until I was safely outside the hospital, the cold night air filling my lungs. From that night on, I never went into the dead body room without saying a quick prayer first. I've always loved being in the wild, hiking, camping, and feeling the earth beneath my boots. But that first solo camping trip in the Adirondack Mountains. It was early fall, the perfect time to get away from the chaos of city life and into the quiet of the wilderness. I set up my tent along a secluded trail, miles away from any campground. There were no other campers for miles, just trees, mountains, and the occasional rustle of wildlife in the underbrush. It was peaceful, or at least it was supposed to be. As the sun dipped behind the tree line, the forest I was loving began to take a strange change. The usual sounds, birds, crickets, the wind through the trees, stopped. Completely. It was the kind of silence that presses in on you, the kind where even your own breath seems too loud. I tried to ignore it. After all, it was my first solo trip, and I didn't want to let a little weirdness ruin it. But as night fell and I sat by my campfire, something shifted in the woods. I couldn't see anything, but I could feel it. Movement in the trees, just beyond the reach of the firelight. At first I thought it was a deer or a bear, but it was too quiet. And then I heard it. The soft whisper. At first I thought it was the wind, but the words sounded too clear, too intentional. My heart thudded in my chest as I stood up, scanning the trees. "Who's there?" I called into the darkness, my voice more nervous than I wanted it to be. No answer, just the dead silence again. I decided to ignore it, chalking it up to my mind playing tricks. But the whispering didn't stop. In fact, it seemed to draw closer, as if whatever was out there was moving in on me. I could hear soft footsteps, slow, deliberate, like someone was walking around my campsite just out of sight. I grabbed my flashlight, but when I shined it into the woods, there was nothing. The light bounced off trees, casting long, eerie shadows, but no one was there. I tried to reassure myself, but my gut told me something was wrong. I wasn't alone. I spent the rest of the night inside my tent, heart pounding with every snap of a twig. The whispering didn't stop. By morning, I was exhausted, physically and mentally. I packed up as quickly as I could, never once looking back at the woods, and made my way down the trail. To this day, I can't shake the feeling that something followed me out of those woods. And sometimes, when I'm alone in the wilderness again, I hear that whisper on the wind, just at the edge of hearing. I had heard the rumors about the old manor on Mill Road ever since I was a kid. They said it was haunted, that strange lights flickered in the windows at night, and voices whispered through the walls. Most of the time, I'd laugh it off. Who wouldn't? It was just an old abandoned house, right? But one Saturday afternoon, when the sun hung low and the sky looked like it might rain, I decided to find out for myself. The manor was just down the road from where I grew up, but I'd never ventured close, until now. I stood at the edge of the property, my heart racing. The house loomed in front of me, covered in ivy, windows shattered, and the front gate sagging on its hinges. It was eerily silent around it. Not a bird chirped. Not even the wind dared to disturb the thick silence. I stepped inside, my footsteps echoing on the creaky wooden floor. The smell of damp wood and mildew hit me immediately. The house was falling apart, but there was something else, something heavier. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I felt like someone is watching me. Or was just my thoughts. The hallway stretched in front of me, dim and full of shadow. But I continued, anyway. I had to see it all. The grand staircase, the rooms full of forgotten history. The walls were lined with faded wallpaper, the edges curling, peeling away in some places. Some of the rooms still had old furniture covered in dusty sheets, but there was something off about them, like the furniture didn't quite belong where it was. I wandered through the house for what felt like hours, until I found a door at the end of the hallway. It wasn't locked, but when I opened it, I was hit with a blast of cold air. I stepped inside, and the floor creaked loudly under my weight. The room was empty except for an old rocking chair in the far corner. As I walked toward it, I noticed something strange. The chair was moving, just slightly, back and forth, as though someone had just been sitting in it. My soul felt cold. The room felt wrong, like it was charged with energy, vibrating. That's when I heard it, soft laughter, low and distant, like a child's giggle. I spun around, heart in my throat, but the room was still empty, just the rocking chair, moving slowly in the corner. Suddenly I wasn't alone anymore. I could feel something, a presence. It brushed past me, just out of my vision, and I snapped around, too frightened to move. A voice echoed in the air, faint but clear. I didn't need to be told twice. I ran out of the house, through the hallway and down the steps, not daring to look back. The front gate swung open as I slammed it shut behind me, breathless, heart pounding. And as I looked up at the manor one last time, I could have sworn I saw a shadow pass by the window on the second floor. I didn't stay to confirm it. I just ran, away from that house and whatever still lingered inside. A couple of years ago, I spent most of my time skating. I didn't have many friends I could skate with, so I was always on the lookout for new friends to skate with. There was this really friendly guy at the skate park who seemed really motivated on making new friends and making somewhat of a skate crew. He was really motivated on getting skate clips and photos to put on social media. We got along, and he was really friendly, so I figured why not network with a new friend to skate with. I gave him my number, and he seemed perfectly normal at first. He hit me up a few days later, and I picked him up and we skated. The whole time, he still was completely normal and cool. Nothing suspicious or strange at all. I dropped him off and everything was chill. A couple of days later, while I'm at school, he texts me asking if I wanted to skate. I was busy and didn't reply. Within an hour, he sends me multiple texts saying something like, "Why aren't you answering me? What did I do?" "I'm sorry." I said, "Screw it." And that night asked him to skate. I know that sounds really stupid, but I thought maybe just based on my previous interaction that he was on some sort of spectrum of autism. Even though this may have seemed like a sketchy decision to hang out with him, the whole time we hung out, it was completely normal. It was the same friendly, motivated guy I met. However, after I dropped him off, things got worse. A few days later, the same thing happened where he texted me. I got busy, and he blew up because I didn't respond to him. However, this time, I didn't reply at all that day or night, and it set him off even more. He sent me hundreds of texts over the next week, going from aggressively clingy, as seen before, I guess that's the way to describe it, to completely delusional. We met when I was 19, but he texted me delusional stuff saying, "Remember when we were kids and you'd come over and we'd hang out? You'd have your shirt off and we'd play." I felt sorry for this guy. I knew he was a good guy with a good heart, but he just suffered from serious mental illness, it seemed. I just wished he had more people in his life who could help him control his issues. Later, he started calling me over and over again. I have hundreds of voicemails from him, and the creepiest thing about the voicemails is they are all silent. He would call my phone and just sit there silently, leaving voicemails where I could hear him breathing or hear a fan in the background. This went on initially for a few months. I thought he lost my number and forgot about me. But then a few more months after this all died down, he started calling again, but under an unknown number, so I couldn't block him. This happened off and on for about a year. There was one incident where someone came to the house, went through our gate, and vandalized our front yard. We're not sure if it was him or not, but after that, we installed cameras. That was the worst it got. Mostly he called on and off for a year. There was one instance where he used his mom's phone. I believe it was his mom's phone. Because the text read, "This is Justin's mom. Justin just wants to know why you won't talk to him." Back before he started calling under unknown numbers again, I replied to the text, asking if Justin was okay and saying he needed help. Then he texted me from his phone saying, "Don't bother my mom." This cooled down after about a year ago. I'm not sure what happened to him, but I hope he got the help he needs and is doing okay. The Sierra Nevada mountains have always called to me. There's something magical about the rugged landscape, the jagged peaks, the pristine lakes, and the untouched beauty of the wilderness. That's why I decided to take my first solo camping trip there. I thought I was prepared for everything. I was wrong. I arrived at a remote spot near the base of Mount Whitney, a place where few people venture. The hike up was long but beautiful, and by the time I set up my camp by a crystal-clear lake, the sun was beginning to set. I made a campfire, cooked a simple meal, and let the peace of the mountains wash over me. But as the stars began to appear, I noticed something strange. The mountain itself seemed to be calling to me. Not in a literal sense, of course, but there was a feeling, an overwhelming sense that the mountain wanted me to approach it. Every time I turned my gaze to the towering peak, I felt a pull, like something was drawing me closer. I laughed it off at first. It was probably just the altitude getting to my head. But the longer I sat there, the stronger the sensation grew. It was as though the mountain was speaking to me, whispering my name in the wind. I couldn't explain it, but I had an overwhelming urge to climb, to reach the top. I knew I shouldn't. It was already late, and I had no gear for a night climb. But the pull was irresistible, so in the dead of night, I packed a small bag and set off toward the base of the mountain, following an old trail that seemed to lead upward. The higher I climbed, the stranger the landscape became. The rocks looked different, sharp, jagged, unnatural, and the air grew thinner, harder to breathe. But I couldn't stop. I had to reach the top. That's when I saw it, a figure standing on the ridge ahead of me, a tall shadow, almost human, but distorted by the shadows of the mountain. I called out, but it didn't respond. It simply stood there, staring down at me. Fear finally gripped me, and I turned back, scrambling down the mountain as quickly as I could. When I reached my camp, I collapsed by the fire, breathing hard, trying to shake off the feeling that something was waiting for me up there, something that had been watching me the entire time. I left the Sierra Nevada the next morning, early before the sun even rose. I didn't feel safe there anymore. The mountain had called to me, but whatever it wanted, I didn't stick around long enough to find out. Some mountains shouldn't be climbed alone. I've spent my whole life on the farm, but nothing prepared me for the night I spent out there alone. It wasn't a full moon. In fact, the night was darker than usual. Thick clouds covered the sky, and not a star was visible. I had to check on the new lambs in the barn, and with the rest of the family out of town, I was left to handle things on my own. The wind was calm, and the air had that strange, still feeling to it, like nature itself was holding its breath. The farmhouse behind me stood silent, casting long shadows across the yard. The only sound was the soft crunch of my boots on the dirt path as I made my way to the barn. I remember looking across the fields. The crops had been planted months ago, and though I couldn't see much in the dark, I knew the rows of corn stretched out far into the horizon. But there was something about it, the way the fields felt. Empty. As I entered the barn, the scent of hay and warm earth surrounded me. The lambs were fine, just resting under the hay bales, but something felt wrong. My flashlight flickered and the beam danced across the dim interior. I paused, listening, but the barn was as still as everything else outside. Then I heard it, a soft rustle from the open field, like something, or someone, moving through the tall, dry grass. I tried to dismiss it, probably just an animal, maybe a deer or a raccoon. But my heart began to race anyway. I walked to the back of the barn, where I could see out over the pasture. Nothing. Just the tall, dark silhouettes of the crops swaying in the windless night. I went back to checking on the lambs, but that's when I heard the whisper. It was faint at first, like the wind, but then it grew clearer. Someone or something was calling my name. Ethan! I froze. It was my name, and I knew it wasn't my imagination. The voice sounded like it came from just outside the barn. I grabbed the nearest pitchfork, my grip tight around the handle as I stepped cautiously toward the door. Ethan! The voice again, louder this time, and closer. I opened the barn door slowly, the cold night air rushing in. The moon was still hidden behind the clouds, leaving the fields in total darkness, but I could make out the silhouette of someone, standing at the edge of the cornfield. They were just standing there, not moving, but I knew they were watching me. I called out, my voice shaking. Who's there? No answer. The figure didn't move, didn't respond, but I could feel the weight of their gaze, as though their eyes were burning into my skin. I took a step forward, heart pounding, and then in one quick movement, the figure vanished, melted into the corn. One moment they were there, and the next, nothing but empty fields. The wind picked up, rustling the dry stalks, and I could have sworn I heard footsteps behind me, just out of sync with my own. I ran back into the barn and locked the door, my hands trembling as I dropped the pitchfork. I could still hear the faint whispering, but it was no longer my name. It was a voice I didn't recognize, a low murmur that seemed to come from the ground itself. I spent the rest of the night in the barn, listening to the sounds of the field moving around me, shuffling, whispering, and sometimes like someone was walking just out of sight. By morning, the sun was finally rising, and the field had returned to its quiet, empty self. But I could still feel it, that presence, the thing that had been watching me, and I knew that night wasn't the first time it had come. I always liked the quiet, the kind of quiet you only get when you're home alone. No noise, no distractions, just me, my thoughts, and whatever book I happened to be reading. That night, my parents were out of town, visiting my aunt. I had the whole house to myself, and after a long week of school, it was exactly what I needed. The evening went as planned. I made a quick dinner, watched a bit of TV, then retreated to my room to relax. I had the door to my bedroom cracked open just enough to hear the sounds of the house settling, creaks in the floorboards, the wind rustling the trees outside. It was around midnight when it started. At first I thought I was imagining it, a soft knock, quiet, rhythmic, coming from the front door. Knock, knock, knock. I froze. My heart picked up a beat. I checked the time, 12:08 a.m. It seemed too late for anyone to be visiting. I wasn't expecting anyone, and my parents hadn't told me about any plans for guests. The knocking came again. I stood up from my bed, trying to calm myself. It was probably just some late-night delivery driver, right? Or a neighbor. Still, I felt uneasy. I walked to the window and peeked out. But the streetlights cast long, empty shadows on the quiet street. No cars, no one outside. I slowly walked down the hall to the front door, my footsteps muffled on the carpet. The house was too still, the air too thick. I hesitated before unlocking the deadbolt. The knocking had stopped, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Still, I told myself I was being paranoid. I cracked the door open, just a few inches. No one was standing there, just the empty porch, the wind tossing leaves across the steps. Confused and slightly relieved, I closed the door, but then the knocking resumed, louder this time. and it wasn't coming from the door anymore. It was coming from somewhere inside the house. My blood ran cold. I turned slowly, my eyes scanning the dark hallway. Nothing, no sound, no movement. I stood there, frozen, listening for another noise, and then I heard it, a low whisper. "Let me in." I spun around, but the hallway was empty. My chest tightened. I ran to my parents' room, locked the door, and grabbed my phone to call them. As the dial tone echoed in my ear, I noticed something. On the wall, just next to the doorframe, was a small handprint. It wasn't mine, and it hadn't been there earlier. The line clicked, and my mother's voice came through. "Hello? Mom, something's wrong. Someone's in the house." Before I could finish, the line went dead. The phone screen went black. I felt the hairs on my neck stand up. And then I heard it again, the knocking, louder than ever, coming from inside the room. I backed into the corner, my breath shallow, the knocking moving closer with every second. The door handle twisted. The door opens, but there was nothing there, just the cold emptiness of the darkened hallway. I bolted out of the house and didn't stop running until I reached my neighbor's place. I couldn't go back inside. Not then. The next morning, when I finally gathered enough courage to return, the house was exactly the same. But when I went to check the doorframe, the handprint was gone, as if it had never been there at all. We had always dreamed of escaping the hustle and bustle of city life. The constant noise, the crowds, and the never-ending rush were taking a toll on us. So, when we found a charming cabin in the woods for rent, it felt like the perfect opportunity for a fresh start. My wife, Sarah, our 2 kids, Emma and Jake, and I packed our belongings and set off for our new home, excited for the peace and tranquility that awaited us. The cabin was everything we had hoped for, nestled among tall trees, with a serene lake nearby and a spacious yard for the kids to play in. We spent the first few days settling in, exploring the surrounding area, and enjoying the quiet. But it wasn't long before we started to notice strange things happening. It began with little things, objects moved from their original places, doors left open that we were sure we had closed. At first, we dismissed it as us still adjusting to the new environment. One evening, as we were having dinner, there was a loud thud from outside. We all jumped and I went to check, but there was no sign of anything unusual. The next morning we found a note taped to the front door. The message was simple but chilling. "I'm watching you." Our sense of security shattered, and a wave of paranoia washed over us. Sarah and I decided not to tell the kids, hoping to protect them from the fear that had gripped us. We called the local sheriff, who assured us they would keep an eye on the area and advised us to be vigilant. Over the next few days, the unsettling messages continued. We found notes in the mailbox, on the windshield of our car, and even inside the cabin. Each message was more disturbing than the last, with references to our daily activities and personal details that only someone close by could know. I installed security cameras around the property, hoping to catch the stalker in the act. But the footage revealed nothing. The cameras would go blank for a few minutes, and then another note would appear. Our sense of paranoia grew, and we began to feel trapped in our own home. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of leaves outside sent us into a state of high alert. Emma and Jake sensed our anxiety, and it became harder to keep the truth from them. One night, unable to sleep, I sat in the living room, staring at the dark forest outside. A movement caught my eye, a shadowy figure standing at the edge of the yard, watching the cabin. I grabbed a flashlight and rushed outside, but by the time I reached the spot, the figure was gone, leaving only another note. "You can't escape me." The next morning, Sarah and I decided to take matters into our own hands. We began to investigate the cabin's history and the surrounding area. We spoke to neighbors and visited the local library, searching for any clues that might help us identify the stalker. We discovered that the previous occupants of the cabin had also experienced strange occurrences and had left abruptly, without explanation. The cabin seemed to have a dark past, and we couldn't shake the feeling that it was somehow connected to our tormentor. One afternoon, while going through old records at the library, we found a news article about a man named Victor who had lived in the cabin years ago. He had been a recluse, known for his erratic behavior and obsession with watching others. Victor had vanished without a trace, and his disappearance remained a mystery. Determined to confront the stalker, Sarah and I set a trap. We placed a fake note on the front door, pretending to leave for the day but hiding in the woods to watch. Hours passed, and just as we were about to give up, we saw him. Victor, or what was left of him. His appearance was ghostly, his eyes hollow and filled with malevolence. We approached him cautiously, and he turned to face us, his expression a mix of anger and desperation. "Why are you doing this?" I demanded, my voice steady despite the fear. "You took my home," Victor replied, his voice a chilling whisper. "This is my place, and you don't belong here." Realizing that Victor was beyond reasoning, we called the sheriff, who arrived quickly and took Victor into custody. It turned out that Victor had been hiding in an old abandoned shed deep in the woods, living off the land and keeping a close watch on the cabin. With Victor gone, the eerie occurrences stopped, and we finally felt a sense of relief. The sheriff assured us that Victor would receive the help he needed, and we were grateful to have our peace restored. The experience left us shaken, but it also brought us closer together as a family. We learned the importance of vigilance and trusting our instincts. And while the memory of our ordeal would always linger, we were determined to move forward and make the cabin in the woods a true sanctuary. My name is Jack Thompson, and I've always been drawn to the thrill of exploration. Caves and tunnels hold a particular fascination for me. They're dark, winding passages, a mystery waiting to be unraveled. Over the years, I've ventured into countless tunnels, each one offering a new challenge and adventure. One crisp autumn morning, I set out to explore a tunnel I had recently discovered in a remote part of the forest. The entrance was partially hidden by overgrown vegetation, and it took some effort to clear the way. Armed with my flashlight, a rope, and a backpack filled with supplies, I descended into the darkness, my excitement growing with each step. The tunnel was narrow, with walls that seemed to close in around me. I navigated the twists and turns, my flashlight casting eerie shadows on the damp, rocky surfaces. As I ventured deeper, the air grew colder, and the silence was almost deafening. After what felt like hours of crawling and squeezing through tight passages, I reached a point where the tunnel became even narrower. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the challenge, and began to inch my way forward. The walls pressed against my shoulders, and I had to contort my body to fit through the tight space. Suddenly, I felt a jolt of panic. My backpack snagged on a jagged rock, and I couldn't move. I tried to free myself, but the more I struggled, the tighter the grip seemed to become. My heart pounded in my chest, and a cold sweat broke out on my forehead. I took a few deep breaths, trying to calm myself. "Stay focused," I muttered under my breath. "You can get out of this." I carefully removed my backpack, inching it forward ahead of me. With the extra space, I managed to free myself from the rock's grip. Relieved, I continued to crawl through the narrow passage, but the fear of getting stuck again lingered in my mind. As I pressed on, I noticed the tunnel beginning to widen slightly. Encouraged, I pushed forward, eager to find a larger chamber where I could rest. But just as I thought I was in the clear, the tunnel took a sharp turn and narrowed once more. Determined not to let fear get the better of me, I continued. But the further I went, the more difficult it became to move. The walls seemed to close in, and the air grew staler. I felt a growing sense of claustrophobia, and every breath seemed to take more effort. I reached a point where the tunnel was so tight that I could barely move. I tried to back out, but I was wedged in too tightly. Panic set in, and I struggled to free myself, but it was no use. I was trapped. In the suffocating darkness, I felt a wave of despair wash over me. My flashlight flickered, and I was plunged into darkness. The silence was oppressive, and the weight of the earth above me seemed to press down with an unimaginable force. I knew I had to stay calm if I had any chance of getting out alive. I focused on my breathing, trying to steady my racing heart. I fumbled for my radio, hoping to reach someone on the surface. "Mayday, mayday," I called, my voice trembling. "This is Jack Thompson. I'm trapped in a tunnel. Please respond." The seconds stretched into minutes, and there was no reply. I tried again, my voice more desperate. Finally, I heard a crackle of static, followed by a voice. "Jack, this is Tom. What's your location?" Relief washed over me as I recognized the voice of my friend and fellow explorer, Tom. "I'm deep in the tunnel," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "The passage narrowed and I'm stuck. I can't move, forward or backward." "Hang in there, Jack," Tom said. "We'll find you. Just stay calm." I clung to his words, trying to hold on to hope. I knew it would take time for them to reach me, but knowing that help was on the way gave me the strength to endure. Hours passed, and the darkness seemed to stretch on forever. The silence was broken only by the occasional crackle of the radio as Tom and the rescue team communicated. I focused on my breathing, trying to keep my mind occupied with thoughts of freedom. Finally, I heard the sound of voices and footsteps echoing through the tunnel. My heart leaped with joy as I saw the beam of a flashlight cutting through the darkness. "Jack, we're here," Tom called, his voice filled with determination. "We're going to get you out." The rescue team worked tirelessly, carefully chiseling away at the rock and widening the passage. It was slow, painstaking work, but they never gave up. After what felt like an eternity, they managed to free me from the narrow passage. I emerged from the tunnel, my body aching, but my spirit unbroken. The cool, fresh air was a welcome relief, and I took a deep breath, savoring the taste of freedom. Tom clapped me on the back, a wide grin on his face. "You did it, Jack. You made it out." I smiled, grateful for the support of my friends and the resilience that had carried me through the ordeal. The experience had tested my limits and taught me much. There's an abandoned house on Hawthorne Hill in Oregon, and the locals avoid it like the plague. They say there are eyes in the house, always watching. I couldn't resist. I had to see for myself. The house was perched atop a small hill, its broken windows staring out like hollow eyes. It had been empty for years, left to rot in the wilderness. I had no business being there, but I wasn't one to back down from a challenge. I had my camera, my recorder, and my gear ready. I walked up the overgrown path, my boots crunching the leaves beneath me. As I approached the front door, it swung open on its own, creaking with an unnatural ease. I hesitated for a moment, but pushed forward. Inside, it was as expected, dusty, abandoned, decaying. The air was thick with mildew, and the faint smell of rot lingered in the corners. But what unsettled me the most were the eyes, paintings, photographs, and mirrors, all with eyes that seemed to follow me as I moved. At first I thought it was just the angle, but the more I looked, the more alive they seemed. The deeper I went into the house, the stronger the sensation became. Every step felt like I was being watched. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was lurking just beyond my vision. And then I heard it, the soft sound of footsteps, not my own. I spun around, but the room was empty. I tried to brush it off as the house settling, but the footsteps persisted. They followed me from room to room, never quite in sync with my own. The air grew heavier, colder, and I could feel the pressure on my chest. The sound of those footsteps echoed louder and louder, until I could no longer deny it. Someone else was here. I rushed down the hallway toward the stairs, but as I turned the corner, I froze. At the end of the hall, standing motionless in the dark, was a figure. A tall man in a long dark coat, his face obscured by shadow. He didn't move, but I could feel his eyes on me. The same feeling, the same sensation, came rushing back, his eyes. I blinked. They weren't just in the paintings or mirrors. They were his eyes, and they were alive, staring, burning through the darkness. "Get out," a voice whispered in my ear. I turned and bolted for the door. My heart raced as I crashed through the front door and down the path. As I reached the bottom of the hill, I looked back once, and there, in the window of the house, were those eyes, watching, following me.